we have a question around, because we've done quite a lot of we're doing quite a lot of preschool work at the moment.
Yes.
Any sort of hints and tips and techniques you can use when working with a preschooler to really make sure they're fully involved, that it's really child-centered? Sometimes people aren't so keen to have them in the, you know, for them to be there. Sometimes they can obviously find it difficult to stay in the room with you. Obviously language needs can be a challenge. So yeah, any sort of hints and tips really? What techniques do you tend to use to make sure it's still really person-centered when you're working?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then not sort of tokenistic, really. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, one thought is sometimes not to have the child as the focus, but have the family as the focus. So it's like a family path or a family map. That can sometimes help. The other kind of things we would do is to keep it super visual. So well, it's all super visual in a way, but maybe to kind of get out the paper and crayons and colours and let all the little ones kind of have a piece of paper so they can kind of do something active that involves kind of colouring and is visual. They can almost stand by the graphic and hold what they've done. I like drama as well. I think drama is a really lovely thing to do. You know, what would this look like? Let's stand up, let's act it out, what your future would look like, you know, because you're saying you want to have lots of you want to be very lively in the future, or you want to, if they've got some language, or maybe people are saying that, so getting people to kind of act out whatever it might be in their future, that can work beautifully with little ones. They like that, and they can see it. It comes to life. You're not relying on the language or the written words up on the paper so much, and the graphic can still record it. So yeah, definitely can do work like that. But really, you know, you can be working, as you know, with children who don't speak at all. And there it's always the assumption that they are understanding, that something's working for them. You're talking to them, even the baby in arms in a way, you're talking to them as if they are understanding, with no real sense of what's going on or what's not. But that's the kind of direction of travel. That's the respectful space you're holding, I think, really, assuming they're understanding, and then seeing what comes. And other people then speak, and obviously what they say, you know, you record that. And often that's that then becomes almost as close as we can get to the child's voice. Does that help a bit, Georgina?
Yeah, it's really helpful. Yeah, really helpful.
It's instinct. If you've got to dress up a bit, you know, you've got to go really silly. I mean, I think sometimes we've certainly got to get on the floor, haven't we? There's no question about that.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people think, oh, I've got to stand up because that's how you have to do it. Well, you don't have to do that. You can get right on the carpet, get right down there. And I've certainly had tents in the room as well, little tents that children can kind of scuttle into if it's getting too much for them. So whatever you take, especially children with autism, obviously autistic children, they probably want to kind of just reduce it all down a bit. So what does that take, really? So the use of big props, you know, big furry animals they can hold, or things they can fiddle with and nibble on and suck on, chew on, all that kind of stuff, really. And lots of breaks, lots of coming and going. Remembering all the time it should feel more like party than it should feel like meeting. That's always the direction of travel with this.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think at the moment we're still trying to do a lot virtually, so I think you've just kind of, yeah, we really need to be in the room, I think, for a lot.
So hard, hard, because you can imagine when I have done with little ones, they just disappear off the screen, don't they? You've got no idea what's going on there.
And then it feels quite different. Yeah.
Quite different.
Yeah, yeah, that's lovely. Thank you.
One advantage actually I've found with the virtual ones is that sometimes you have the whole family there, whether you planned it or not. So you do get that sort of soft toy coming across as the image, and climbing on and off the lap and things, which
it's true.
yeah, it does sometimes happen like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes the child's much more comfortable because they're in the home, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or cuddle, snuggle down in their favourite armchair with their favourite toy, and everything's nice and familiar around them. Yeah, I've noticed that as well. Actually, there are definitely some pluses in that way, and the way you can beam in that favourite auntie who lives in Australia. You know, they can be there, can't they? Which usually that'd be much more of a struggle for us. So yeah, that's rich, definitely rich. Any more questions?
My one is there's a lot of pressure, as I'm sure you know, around EHCP requests have risen dramatically, and we were wanting to stay as child-centred as possible, but the demands of what you need to write and what you need to get from the meeting can dilute what you hope to be as a child-centred process. What's your thoughts, Colin, on that. And
yes, and I keep talking to people from around, around the country. Different people are trying it. The places to go and talk to people, see how they're getting on, are West Sussex, Suffolk, Pembrokeshire, and City of London. Actually, they're the ones we've had most dealings with on this. Interesting, City of London are asking us to do it. What they're doing is they're obviously collecting information and doing a lot of the paperwork. This is the SEND team, and they're calling it, can you get the child's views? And then I'm doing like a path, interestingly. Full path, start to finish, and they seem to find that that's quite rich for them. They seem to be using that. That's interesting, isn't it? So that's talking to Derbyshire around sort of, they're calling it, or the JAM, they're calling it, joint, I forget what the A and the A stands for, but something meeting. So anyway, but they're trying to make those more person-centered. And talking it through with them, it's the outcomes, the piece they really want. And of course, the outcomes are built into a path process, aren't they? And so you can get the aspiration, that's the dream. The outcomes are the kind of a year from now. So that's quite rich, isn't it, really? And a lot, but then it's just, I think the problem for us psychologists is people want our views, don't they? They want our theories, especially if there's the tricky behaviour around, there's complex emotional stuff around. And I think there isn't really an easy, straightforward place for that, is there, in terms of the path and the map process. I think probably something else needs creating that allows that, really. Or we're there somehow as a participant, and maybe our colleagues are kind of running the process, and we can feed that in a kind of more natural way. But it's hard to see where a theory fits in the dream or or a year from now. It doesn't naturally fit, does it? It fits with the Cell of Adults process, fits beautifully in that kind of deep problem solving process. Yes. Which I still love, I have to say. Yes. But yeah, I think. But think back to the EHCP though. So I think if time's limited, we can certainly do the outcome piece, and we can do the aspirational piece with the dreams, just the outcomes for a year ahead. And yeah, well, you could go along with that actually, couldn't you? Those two pieces.
We typically would start with a dream, then we talk about strengths and interests, and then look at each area. What we've been doing is, once the meeting's finished, we then kind of, if we're in a pair, talk about what we might, from the process, have gained in terms of the psychology part, the psychological perspective. So we've been unpicking it that way.
They're easy to write up, of course, aren't they? If you do the full path, writing it up, it just falls, doesn't it? It falls through the fingers, because it's very easy, isn't it? Because you've got the visual there. It's easy to remember what happened in the meeting. And yeah, then the strengths, gifts piece, which obviously sits within the map quite nicely. There's a whole piece on that, isn't there? Yeah, so strengths and interests, in dreams, echoes of the teacher, strengths and interests. But people want you to go through the sections, don't they? But that could be recorded, there's sort of cognitive and so on and so on. But if that's being collected well by the school and by the teacher or others, if others do a good job on that, you wouldn't think you'd have to spend so long on that, would you? Or have to do it again as a psychologist, which would be nice, because then you could spend your time facilitating this process. The trouble is, it isn't always done well, isn't it? And there's your problem. So then you think, oh, you know what, I'm going to have to ask about this, and I'm going to have to process this. What you could do is, in the outcome piece, explore those, go out of your way to capture the headings. So social and communication is a bit of a dull thing to have a memory about, but you could say, let's remember what was happening about getting on with people and communicating. You could kind of guide the conversation like that to flush out some rich language. And if it didn't come rich enough, between you and the graphica, make sure that you did get enough detail that could then easily be written up. See, that could work. I could see that.
Yeah.
And then you're getting much closer to it, because then what are you missing? If you've done that, you've done the kind of areas of functioning as kind of memories, you've done the dreams and aspirations, you've got your outcomes under those kind of headings. And then now, you could even break the now down if you wanted to, couldn't you, really?
Yeah.
So how are things going now in social and communication kind of areas? How are things now in, that'd be, you could almost do that, couldn't you? That'd be interesting.
That's what we have been doing. So that's
doing that, yes.
Yeah.
You're adapting, aren't you, really? You're just adapting and kind of wriggling in with and trying to be present. The problem is, person-centered planning and the EHCP processes in many ways are miles apart, aren't they? Because sadly, the EHCP process is still medical model, isn't it?
Yes.
We don't want it to be, but it is, isn't it? It still wants to know about the difficulties, the kind of leaning towards the what's wrong with the child, you know, all that stuff, sadly, is still present, isn't it, really? So we can start with a nice little person-centered piece, but there's still the big but, isn't there? But that's what people want to see. And if we don't put it in, somebody else will. Somebody in the SEND team will put it in. So this is difficult. This is difficult.
And I think that's how our meetings feel, don't they? They start and it feels lovely and it feels perfect, you know, and you're doing, and then it's like, oh, now we talk about it now. And then it feels quite different, you know, and that's where it can feel, it just feels quite, sometimes can be quite uncomfortable with that young person. And yeah, it just feels like we're doing two different processes almost and trying to combine them, really.
I think you're right. It is you're doing two things, aren't you, really?
Yeah.
Maybe it is impossible to really crunch them together with the young person in the room in a kind of respectful way. Maybe we should just say, let's do a really nice person-centered planning process, and then we'll have to do the other bit. And the trouble is, that's time, isn't it? Time you won't have. And that's that's the problem, really. But if you were really pushed for time, maybe you could just do the dreaming and the goal setting with the young person in the room, and then a young person leaves, and then you do the other piece. Maybe that's the kindest thing for the child. Have done something very person-centered, and maybe add the thing that you say, Karen, the interests and the strengths part as well. But then, when the child leaves, then you kind of do the other bit, which is not so pretty, and his medical model, and but it's got to be done. But also that would allow you then to feed in your theories if it was stuff around behaviour, and emotional stuff. Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe we're designing it right now.
Yeah.
Let me see what that looks like.
I think I've done that on occasion. It's really nice to hear you say that, Colin, and maybe because I've always worried that then I'm taking the person out of the meeting and they're no longer person-centered. But I think you're right. You remind me of almost the obvious, that it's the kindest thing for that young person if we're holding that young person in mind. It's still person-centered if we're asking them to only stay for that really lovely, positive sort of part.
And obviously, it'd be real. It's not, you wouldn't be making it real, because it would be the goals ahead with the young person. You're not saying that's not the case. It's just the kind bit is, I mean, well, I suppose back to first principles. How would you want this done if it was you, or your own child, or somebody you loved? Would you want them in the room having that conversation? I don't know if I would, actually. Would you? I don't know. What do you think? I love the other bits. I could definitely would want them there, wouldn't you?
It depends on the adults and their phrasing.
Exactly. If they can do it in a kind of gentle, respectful way, if they can talk, they could talk to you in a way on your child. It was kind of in a way the child could hear, in a kind of constructive way. It'll be fine with it, but some people can't, can they? It just doesn't feel entirely safe, does it, really?
No, and I think that's the thing with the EHCP process. By the time parents get to that point, it can feel really important to make sure that those really difficult parts are heard by everybody there. And it can be a bit of a barrier to maintaining the positive sort of gentle.
So true.
The trickier part. So they still need containing as well.
It's true. It's true. It's true. What would be nice is if we could get rid of all the other stuff, wouldn't it, and just do a pass.
Yes. We're all on board with that, Colin.
Let's start badgering our MPs about that, because really it's all got to have control across the UK as well, isn't it? The EHCP process. Everybody's on this kind of trajectory up of the amount, and it's just it's not really helping anything, is it, really?
No.
It's certainly not helping your work. It's holding you back from what you'd love to be doing, isn't it, really? That rich person-centered work you could be doing.
When it's frustrating. So at a time when psychology is needed the most, you're being reactive by, the nature of what's happening at the moment.
We have, as a whole service, started to think about, started to share tools together, haven't we, that people have developed for, obviously we still do our other work with school, which we call our traded work, where we can do more of the less structured, we're not imposing as much, if any, structure onto the situation. We're not looking to meet our own needs through it, but actually facilitating for the people who are in the PAP, and we've come up with some different resources for that, which we've shared. So we're looking forward to doing more of that when we've knocked back the statutory wave at the moment.
Good luck with that. But I think, don't you think that systemically, well, nationally we need something systemically, but even locally, systemically, something of our processes for being able to say no, because the wording is too wide open, isn't it? This child may have special needs. Well, that's a lot of children. That's every child with special needs potential, isn't it? That, yeah, it needs some tighter criteria, certainly nationally, but even locally, putting some construction on what we mean by that locally. So you're able to say no, we don't even think we should go down this line, but also no, we don't think we should issue the EHCP. And there are other ways of getting resources, you know, which you're probably on top of in Hampshire, that side of it. But that has to be a better way, isn't it? That has to be, and that will have to involve schools, won't it? Actively involving schools as participants in those kind of decision-making processes, so they can scrutinise and let people know. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah, definitely.
But that takes us to a whole other place. So is that enough from me?
That's brilliant. Thank you. What a pleasure. Oh, yeah. I'm thrilled.
Can you come every week, Colin?
Yeah, please. Yeah. Well, do stay in touch, because I'd love to have more of these conversations.
Yeah.
No problem. No problem. And if you do anything interesting, and anybody wants to write it up, just a couple of paragraphs, we'll put it straight on our blog, because people are interested in this, aren't they?
Yeah.
I don't have to look at our blog anyway, but just sign up to it. It's on the website, and we're trying to make it interesting, and putting interesting videos like this out is what we're lucky to do now. So that's what we're going to do. So thank you so much. Lovely talking to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Take care. Thanks,
Take care.
Colin. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.